For example, you are going to write a set of statements to calculate simple interest. So all those statements are called as a function. And the function can receive the inputs in the form of parameters and also can produce the output in the form of result. So the process is the function, inputs are the parameters or also called as arguments, and the result value is called as return value. For example, for the function that calculates the simple interest, principal amount, rate of interest, and the number of years, these three are the inputs. So these are called parameters. And after calculation, you will find out the simple interest based on the principal amount. So that result value is called as return in case of function. So what that function gives back to the calling portion, that is called return value. But what we provide as inputs to the function while invoking the same, those are called arguments or parameters. And in a large program, you can identify smaller individual tasks. So each smaller and individual task can be represented as a function so that you can reuse the same function many times. Means the function that is created once can be called multiple times. So reusability and modularity is the best benefits of functions. Whenever you create a function, without calling it, it will not be executed. So a function must be called in order to execute the same. A function doesn't execute on its own. For example, there is a function that is addition, and you will supply two numbers as inputs for the same. So in order to execute that function, we have to call that function with its name, that is add, and supply those two numbers as arguments. So whenever you call the function, that function definition will be executed and its return value will be returned back to the calling portion. Let me demonstrate how to create functions practically. So let me create a file called functions.js. And here I would like to create a function. We can create the function by using function keyword. And within the parentheses, you will specify the arguments. That means the input values that you want to receive into the function. So if function is a task, for performing that particular task, whichever the input values that you require, all those values must be received as arguments or parameters. For example, I would like to create a function to calculate simple interest. So for calculation of that, I require three input values, that is principal amount, rate of interest, and the number of years. So that based on the amount, we will calculate the interest for the specific years. So I am receiving all the parameters, that is the input values that I require to perform this particular task. So inside the function, I can write the actual statements to perform that calculation or task. So let me declare a variable called simple interest, so short name SI. Then the actual formula is principal amount into rate of interest into number of years divided by 100. So that is the formula for simple interest calculation. And I would like to give back the result value, that is SI. So return SI. I would like to give back the return value so that the calling portion can receive this value. So even though we have created a function, that function never executes on its own. We have to invoke the function, then only it executes. So in order to invoke the function, let me store the reference of a function inside a variable. So at the beginning, let me create a variable by using either var or let keyword. Here I am using the let keyword. You can also try using the var keyword. It makes no difference. So let and then some variable name. For example, the suitable name for this is getSimpleInterest. Generally, you will name the functions based on the purpose or the requirement of the function. So what this function is trying to do, it is trying to get or return the actual value of the simple interest, right? So the suitable names for this function is getSimpleInterest or SimpleInterest calculator or calculateSimpleInterest. So based on the purpose or target of the function, it is recommended to provide the suitable name. So here, the reference of the function is being stored in this variable, so that we can refer to that particular function, means we can call that particular function based on this variable name. As of now, we have not yet called that particular function, so we will not get any output as of now, because we have not yet called the function. So that is what I am trying to say. A function never executes on its own, we have to invoke it manually. A function only acts as a group of statements, and it can receive the inputs in the form of parameters and can produce the output by using return statement. And after the return, we can either provide parentheses, and of course that is optional. So in order to really execute the particular code, we have to call the function by its name. Here, what is the name of the function? That means what is the name of the variable that stores reference of the function? That is getSimpleInterest. So we have to call with its name. And now this returned value will be given back to the calling portion, but we are not utilizing it anyway. Means we are not storing the return value in a variable, or we are not printing the same by using console.log. So we have to utilize the return value. For example, let's say console.log. So inside your console.log, we are trying to invoke the getSimpleInterest function, so that this particular return value will be returned back to the calling portion. For example, the return value is 1000, so that 1000 will be printed by using console.log. But as of now, we are getting nan, which indicates not a number. It's because we are not supplying essential input values. So while invoking the function, we have to pass essential input values. Let's say, for example, I am trying to supply 1000 and rate of interest, for example, 6.7, and a number of years, let's say, for example, 3 years. So the execution sequence of this program is, whenever it encounters this particular first statement, it only just creates the function and stores that function reference in this variable, but it doesn't execute anything inside the function body. That means any code that is present inside these braces will not be executed at the beginning. It only creates a function in memory and stores its reference in this variable, that is getSimpleInterest. And next later, we are trying to call the same function by using its variable name, and we are trying to supply its three values, that is 1000, 6.7 and 3. Of course, you can pass any input values whatever you wish. These three values will be automatically supplied into the respective parameters. Meaning, first this 1000 will be assigned into principal, this 6.7 will be initialized into rate of interest, and this value 3 will be assigned into the number of years. So as of now, principal is 1000 and rate of interest is 6.7, and number of years is 3. So we will multiply the same here in the formula, that is 1000 into rate of interest, that is 6.7 into number of years, that is 3. So 1000 into 6.7 into 3 whole divided by 100. That result value is 201. So that value 201 will be stored in this variable called SY, and the same gets returned from this return statement. So that value 201 will come back to the same calling portion from where we have originally called the function. So this statement is equivalent to 201. And that value will be supplied to the console.log statement so that it will print the actual value, that is 201 finally. So the main point that you should remember in this flow is a function will not execute just when you create the same. It really executes only when you call the function. And of course, the same function executes every time when you call the function. Suppose we have invoked the same function 100 times, so the same function executes 100 times. Each time it receives the new values, redo the calculation, and reproduce the return value. So in that way, the function is being reusable. That means a function that is created once can be called multiple times. So let's run this code finally. So we got the output as expected, that is 201. You can call the same function multiple times. Let's say, for example, I am trying to supply difference principal amount, let's say 7,000 and 4.5 interest and a number of years, let's say 10. So we got the relevant output, that is 3,150. And moreover, you can receive the returned value into another variable instead of printing the same directly. For example, I am trying to print it in a variable, let's say simple interest 1, and I am trying to receive the second value into another variable, let's say simple interest 2. And then we can print the same. This is another way to get the return value. Of course, it gives the same output as it before, but the advantage of receiving the return value into another variable is that in future you can reuse the same value for other calculation or something else. Means, for example, you have another formula based on these values. So in that case, instead of recalling the same function once again, you can reuse the same values in that formula. So whenever you don't want to reuse that return value into another formula, then you can directly use that function inside the output statement, that is console.log. But if you want to reuse the return value for another formula, in that case, store the return value in a variable and print the same later. So overall, the execution sequence is the function will not be executed on its own first. The starting point is here. That is, when you call the function, it goes to the function definition and executes all these statements like the first statement and second. And whenever it sees the return value, it comes back to the calling portion along with the return value. So that return value will be stored in this variable that is mentioned here. This is how to create the function with arguments as well as return value.